I think Evan or somebody over there is going to say something important about how to behave.
All right, so just some more quick announcements. If you haven't heard them, please silence your cell phones, but keep them on so you can possibly use them to ask questions. You can use poll everywhere by texting IST startup as one word, then space, and your question to 22333. Again, that's IST startup, one word, then a space, and then your question to 22333. You can also tweet your questions using the hashtag IST startup, and then we're also going to take just hand raising. You're also welcome to take photos and share them on our Flickr stream and on Instagram using hashtag IST startup. Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to introduce Steve Huffman again, only this time he's the man. And all of you, as soon as he makes his remarks, including those guys over there, are prepared to heckle him, right? Right, Steve? Yeah, he's ready.
Right.
He's ready. As you know, because Matt told us briefly before, he's co-founder of Reddit. And this is a social news site that's one of the largest communities online. He created it with his college roommate, like you guys out there, and has watched it, what? Oh, okay. Has watched it grow to 100 million visitors and over 5 billion page views per month. In 2010, he co-founded Hipmunk, a travel search site that has been named to Time Magazine's top 50 websites and top 10 smartphone apps. He was named to Inc. Magazine's 30 Under 30. Is that still true? 30 Under 30?
I'm over 30 now.
Okay, you don't have to admit it. And Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2012. Well, you know he was under 30 in 2012. So he's a 2005 graduate of the University of Virginia. So welcome again, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This is actually my 4th time doing this for you all. Usually my talks are somewhat scatterbrained, especially this one, because I feel like it's a fairly easy audience. This talk is going to be particularly scatterbrained because I didn't normally I read what I'm going to say before I go on, but I was, messing around with Trip moments ago. So we'll just see how it goes. If you have any questions, we'll leave time for QA at the end. But if you have any questions in the middle, I've literally never been interrupted while I'm talking, but I would love it because I think questions are more interesting for me and more interesting for you. And that's usually the funnier part of the talk. So if you've got one, raise your hand. We can try to do that. But otherwise, I'm just going to share with you the thesis of my talk, or at least what I'd like to convey to you, are the things that I wish I knew 9 years ago when I was just kind of getting started with my career. Because I've made so many mistakes, learned things the hard way, just about every single time. And while I don't think there's no way to do everything perfect and to know everything up front, and I know most of my advice will kind of just bounce off you, and it won't make sense until you've made the same mistake, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what he was talking about. But nevertheless, this is a futile attempt to share something and maybe give you some wisdom that will help you in your careers. But I think all career advice, and startup advice in particular, should have this disclaimer attached with it, which is what worked for me, what worked for other people, probably doesn't apply to you. Because there are so many different paths to success, right? There are things we did cleverly, there are things we did accidentally, but unless you're in my exact situation, what we did doesn't always work. And so I think when you're trying to kind of draw wisdom from these talks, or later down the road when you're thinking, oh, Reddit did this, therefore we should do this, you should really think of it more as see if you can understand, I guess, the framework for making decisions that we were in. I think that's what's most important, because every situation is really, really different. So anyway, Reddit, to give you a sense of scale, Reddit's actually still growing. We're at 160 million uniques now and 7 billion page views a month, which is pretty crazy. When we started Reddit in 2005, our motivation was basically, let's not look stupid. Like, we kind of limped our way into Y Combinator. It was Y Combinator's first class. Can we take a step back? Can you raise your hand if you've seen me talk here before? All right, okay, a fair number of you. I'm not going to tell you that whole story of how we got into Y Combinator. It's kind of a long one, and we got in, we got an interview, we were rejected. It was like blah, 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 blah. It's a long story. But it's similar to Trip, actually. We applied to YC with a different idea that we were rejected on. And we were allowed into YC basically to work on this kind of long shot idea, which is, build the front page of the internet. Reddit, we used to call ourselves tongue-in-cheek the front page of the internet, even when we had 2 users. And now I think it actually, we can say that with more of a straight face. But at the time, our motivation was, I don't want to look silly in front of Paul Graham, who let us into YC. And I don't want my mother to be right when she said, you should get a real job. And it's just, that's just kind of the way it is. But I think that leads me to my first, major piece of advice, which is, during those years, we were thinking way too small. When we started Reddit, we really didn't really want to, we didn't want to fail. We didn't want to screw up. We didn't want to look silly. But we weren't thinking, let's build this massive business. Let's build this big community. Let's change the world. None of those things were in our head. It was much, much shallower than that. And I think that held us back. I see lots of first-time entrepreneurs do this. And sometimes I'm still guilty of this, which is, it's really hard sometimes to think bigger and to really make yourself believe that whatever you're doing can be 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger, can change the world. But if you set the bar that high, you'll make different decisions, right? If you're always aiming for, I want to sell my company for $10 million, or I want to raise a little money, or I want to get on TechCrunch, or I want to be a little famous, you might achieve those things, but you probably won't, because everything. Your ceiling is only as good as your plan, and so that means that's your best case scenario. But if you're thinking I'm going to build this company that's going to go public, I'm going to employ hundreds of people, I'm going to change the world in this meaningful way, even if you don't get all the way there, you'll get a lot further. And I think that's a really common mistake first-timers make, is they're just not thinking big enough. So in the early days of Reddit, though, like I said, our motivation was we don't want to look stupid. And we had this fear of failure that I think was a really good thing. For many people, a fear of failure causes you to not do something, just to not try. I don't want to try X because if it doesn't work out, that'll make me look dumb, or I'll feel bad, I can't deal with that. But I think a fear of failure, when it causes you to be extra scrappy and accept no excuses for why you're not going to fail, is a super powerful motivator. And so that was one of the things we held on to. And so in the early days of Reddit, what that meant was we had this community site where you could submit links and whatever, but we had no community. And we thought, this a really common story, I tell it all the time, but I think it was super important, this whole kind of fake it till you make it. On Reddit, all of the content was fake for the first 3 or 4 months. We submitted, Alexis and I, everything ourselves, and we just had this charade that our business was working. And eventually it did. And I remember this really cool moment back in, so we started in June of 2005. In August of 2005 was the first day where I didn't have to submit any fake content, and the site was actually working. And it was really cool, because at that point I'd kind of forgotten, I'd forgotten what we were doing. I was so obsessed with making the site look like it was working that when it actually was working, it kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, we actually have users. I forgot about them, because I've just been doing it myself the whole time. We did this other thing. A lot of things we did during those times were, in hindsight, a really good idea, but I don't think we knew why we did them. But I'll share a few of them. One was we listened to user feedback incessantly. Every email we got, we responded to, we thought about. We basically kind of followed our users around. We didn't really have a plan, which works for some companies, but is probably not a good way of operating. But we learned this thing that we see a lot of Hipmunk as well. that users are kind of dumb. They're really good critics and they have tons of advice. You should do this, you should do that, this is dumb. But it's like, no, you're dumb. But when you're listening to your customers, I think it's critically important you listen to your customers, you should try to figure out why they're saying what they're saying. Like, most people are really bad at product, like coming up with what the product should do, clever new things. Because if that was easy, there'd be a lot more better products in the world. But users are really good at feeling pain. Like, they know they're in pain, right? It's similar to like somebody who's hurt and they use WebMD to figure out what's wrong with them. Like, they're really bad at diagnosing, oh, I have cancer. Like, that must be the issue. In reality, it's you ate bad seafood or whatever. So users are really good at identifying, hey, I'm in pain, this is bad. And so you should try to identify what is causing that pain for them and can we fix it. But make sure you throw out the rest of their email. But that's what we did. And that's kind of how we designed the product for those first year or so. It's just kind of watch what users are doing and try to facilitate it. And that's still largely the way we do things at Hipmunk, although at Hipmunk we are so much more disciplined, and I'll come back to that. One of the other big lessons, I kind of touched on this a moment ago, is you should always have a plan. You should always have a strategy. Even if it's not correct, it's better than nothing, right? Just kind of like swimming aimlessly, you'll never get to where you want to go because you don't know where you want to go. So you should always have a destination in mind, and then you should always be on a path to get there. That destination may change, and that path may change, sometimes every day. But you want you to know, your employees to know, everybody should know, this is the goal, this is how we're getting there. Because you can't scale a business unless people can make decisions on their own. And you have to have a framework for making decisions. You want everybody in your company, when they're confronted with choice A or choice B, to choose the same way that you were going to choose. And the way you get there is by making sure they know the strategy. And if the strategy changes, you talk about it. You should have constant conversations about what's the strategy, where are we going, how do we get there. And then, and that's kind of your job as a leader, right, is to set that stage. At Reddit, again, this is another, I think, big mistake we made, that we weren't, it's hard to say, I want to say we weren't punished for it, but actually I think Reddit could be so much bigger and so much more powerful if we had behaved with more discipline, if they behaved with more discipline now. It's Reddit's always, it's kind of this interesting tale of success where it's worked out wonderfully and it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And I think it's almost sometimes despite itself. Because we tapped into this really wonderful community dynamics, and I think we made some nice product decisions and kind of some nice kind of philosophy decisions in terms of how we treat our users and treat content and whatnot. But I regret that so much. It's one of the biggest pieces of it, but one of the biggest lessons I've learned and applied to Hipmunk, which is always know what you're doing and why and how you're going to get there. But there's so many things that I think if I knew what I knew now, we would have done things differently. At Reddit, the funny thing is we only raised $80,000 until Reddit raised that big round last year. I think Reddit only raised $80,000, and so again, that was a symptom I think of not thinking large enough. And we didn't hire. For the first 6 years of Reddit was 6 people. And I was doing 75% of the work. And that's that's not good. At the time, actually Dave Ryzenko has this piece of advice that he gave me 7 years too late, which was that I now give a lot of people, which is don't be a hero. I had this attitude of I can do this, I'm the best at this, the rest of you can't do this, when it's for everything. And first of all, that was false, and even if it was true, it still would have been the wrong behavior. But I just wanted to be in control of everything, and so we made it pretty far doing that, all things considered, but I think we could have made so much further. And it took me more years to learn how to hire to learn how to delegate, to learn how to manage, to like replace myself. And so now I'm in this wonderful position at Hipmunk where we are so productive. We have such an amazing team, and I don't have to do anything. It's, it's like, I mean, it's kind of true though. It's like I think that's like always my goal now. It's like the complete opposite, which is like the team should be able to make decisions without me. They should be able to build things without me. They should know what we're doing. They should know how to do it. And it makes like everybody's life so much easier, and it makes the company a lot healthier. So we sold Reddit after 18 months. Started in 2005. We sold it in 2006. And probably the biggest like tactical mistake of my life. I'm super proud that we did that, and at the time I was like so excited, and I was like rubbing all my friends' noses in it. I was like, we sold our company, and you guys are still working, and I was like a total like smug douche about it for a long time. And like not only did we sell too early, we made some like silly mistakes again because we weren't thinking big enough. Like during the negotiation took like 6 months, which is an astonishingly long time considering the how early we were. But one of the things that always sticks out to me and that I still kind of kick myself for is our traffic, like we agreed on like a purchase price, and then our traffic doubled, and then like we signed everything, right? Our traffic during that negotiation, our traffic doubled or tripled or something like pretty incredible. We should have been like, hey, the price has doubled. Like, this is like kind of these like no-brainer dumb things, but we were just so blinded. Like we were so kind of dysfunctional and just like we thought the game was over. We're like the economy's gonna blow up. We were right about that. We thought we were like super dysfunctional. We don't know what we're doing. Like this is the end. And I think we were right about all of that except for the part about Reddit like wasn't over. Like we had like no confidence in ourselves, and that's so like we should get out while we can. And that was totally my mistake, right? That was just classic, like not thinking big enough, not believing in yourself. I think we, whatever. Learn that lesson. So, I worked for Reddit for another 3 years, and then eventually I left because I was bored. I felt like I wasn't learning anything. Conde was kind of difficult to work at. Again, I had finally like gotten through my head that I need to like delegate and hire, and I couldn't hire people, and so I was just like super frustrated that I just like couldn't get things done. And in hindsight, I think if I had been better at navigating larger company politics, we could have made that work. But I was like, I want to do something new. I want to take all these lessons and apply it to a new company. So I left. I took some time off, and then my co-founder for Hipmunk, Adam, him and I have been friends for a couple of years, called me and he's like, hey, I want to do another startup, which I was really receptive to doing. And I only had one qualification for that startup, which is it had to be we needed to be involved in the exchange of money. Like users would have to, when the customers were interacting with our business, they were going to have to spend money on something, because I didn't want to have to contrive another business model. At Reddit, it was such a pain in the ass. There's always like this black cloud following us around, which is like, we're not a business. We don't make any money. How are we going to make money? Our users hate ads. They hate doing stuff. Like, again, we were just wrong. Like there's plenty of ways for Reddit to make money, but at the time, we just like, we just weren't an effective business. And so my co-founder really wanted to do travel, which like, I hated that idea so much. I think I still do, maybe. It's like, but Adam was the reigning North American debate champion at the time, and so, as he tends to do, he won that argument. And I'm not very good at saying no to anybody, or particularly friends, so I was like, yeah, sure, why not? But the argument he was making for why we should do travel was, we can build a better product, our competitors stink, which is totally true. Like I just hated kayak. I had to travel all the time, and it was like super frustrating. And I feel like any time I'm frustrated, which is like often, like there's an idea there, right? That's an opportunity. Like if you ever have trouble coming up with startup ideas, just like pay attention to when you're frustrated. And so shopping for travel would just make me rage, like just so angry. So so I agreed with that. But then I felt like, man, this market is so incestuous and competitive, right? There are no startups in travel. Like, there's a reason for that, right? You've got like Priceline, Expedia. You had Kayak at the time, who now is owned by Priceline. But there's really no startups, and everybody. And it's such an obvious idea too, right? These other companies are really like, seems like, just they don't seem to care about their customers very much. And so it's like seemed really obvious thing to do. So why does nobody succeed in travel? That was my argument. I was like, oh, it's just because it's a huge pain in the ass. But it's also the largest market, right? It's like literally the largest market. It's one of the only markets you can describe with a straight face as being $1 trillion market. So that was kind of the attitude we went into starting this company, which is it's involved in the exchange of money. We've got great product opportunity, and we'll figure the rest out. I thought we'd be out of business in 3 months, and then we could work on whatever I wanted to work on. But here we are. It's almost 5 years later, and we're still trucking along. But so we've done. I thought I had all these lessons from Reddit that I would like carry over into Hipmunk, and like Hipmunk would be the best company ever because like now I'm not going to make all these mistakes. But the two businesses literally have nothing in common. Like, other than me, there's like nothing. There's just like the markets are different, the strategies are different, the growth is different, the users are different, like everything's different. But we've learned some really, really important lessons at Hipmunk as well. We made a couple mistakes early on hiring the wrong people. Or again, it's kind of shades of the same mistake, thinking too small. Like every time I've said, and I still do this every once in a while, it's like, I think we have enough engineers. Like finally we're in this good place where we have enough engineers to build whatever we want. And then every time I say that, a month later I'm like, fuck. We need like twice as many engineers. Like, why did I take that month off from recruiting? That was dumb. Hire. Like it is like, I just, now I've been through that cycle. So anytime I hear myself thinking, and my VP of engineers said the other day, he's like, oh, I think we're in a good place on engineering hiring right now. And I was like, no, we're not. No, we're not. Never say that again. That's always false. So that's a big one. At Hipmunk, we started doing product the same way we did at Reddit, which is like we're just kind of shooting from the hip. Kind of what do we feel like doing? What do our users seem to want? Kind of where are they taking us? And if you're not like incredibly like viral like Reddit was, that doesn't work very well. I always talk about this, like growth masks all problems. But if you're not growing super fast, the problems are really apparent. And so at Hipmunk, we did decent, just kind of shooting from the hip, especially when it was all kind of greenfield product development, like build whatever we want. We started in 2010, and in about 2012, the wheels started to fall off a little bit. And that like, we had this kind of flop of a launch. We were trying to build this tool for like business travelers. We did this new release of our hotel product that went over very poorly. Morale at the company was really low, and it was kind of this come to Jesus moment where it's like, we need to get our shit together, basically. And so we made a couple of really key hires. I never believed in product managers. And product managers would always email and be like, hey, I do product, I want to work for your company. And my attitude was just like, no, I do product. Like, you're not coming to my company and doing my favorite part of my job. But turns out, there are people who are really, really good at that. Much better at it than I am. And so we went from being this like kind of very cavalier and casual about how we make product decisions to extremely disciplined. We hired this woman from Zynga. Zynga makes the best PMs. They're like so obsessed with data. They're just like very, very, very disciplined. We hired this one woman, and she literally doubled our productivity in like a month. It's really, really incredible looking back on it. But now we have this very rigorous cycle of what do we want to achieve? These are things like we want to increase conversion rate by 6%. We want to increase revenue per search by 10%. These are kind of like monthly, quarterly goals. We want to increase weekly active users by this. Like just all these like very, very tactical things we want to accomplish. And then we just figure out what can we do to get there. And we have lots of product meetings. What actually, let me take a step back of how we run a business now. We have two main goals: delight our users, increase revenue. Everybody at the business is working on one of those two things, hopefully both. Everybody knows what they're contributing. And then below that, we have sub-goals of like what I was telling you before, like increase this, increase that, increase that, increase that sales, whatever. And then everybody down to like individual contributors knows I'm working on this product to increase this number, which either increases revenue or makes our users happier. And we do this very rigorous, like, what are we going to build? How are we going to build it? When's it going to come out? Launch it. Let it bake for 2 weeks. Everything we launch is launched in a test. We do tons of tests. At any point, we probably have 24 tests going. Even if we know something's going to work, we launch it in a test. Or even if we don't know it's going to work, but we have to launch it, like we redesigned our front page recently, like we didn't really have a choice about that. So we launched that in a test. So that 2 weeks later, we can come back and say, what were we trying to achieve? What actually happened? Why was that? Recommended next steps. Just over and over and over again. Testing and data is so important to us. You know, our front page is kind of a good example because we had to do that for a couple of reasons. One of which was like our old front page was so geared towards searching for flights in hotels that we didn't have room for the new products we're building for searching for cars and packages as well. So we kind of had to redo the whole thing. And we still launched that in a 10% test for a couple of weeks because we want to know, like, first of all, it's kind of risk mitigation, right? If there's a nasty bug, only 10% of our users see it. And then two, we want to know, like, what's the difference in behavior? Like, what do we need to do? And if we had just flipped the switch to turn on our new front page, it's really hard to tell when you're kind of looking at pre-post data what actually changed. Because there's so many variables, right? There's just so many different ways that users can go through your site. So being able to have kind of a apples-to-apples comparison of what users' behavior is super important. So we actually have, like, we spend a lot of our resources as a company working on our internal analytics frameworks that, for better or for worse, we built ourselves. We call it Andre Panel because we didn't like mixed panel, it just wasn't powerful enough for us. So we built our own, and our whole business runs on that. And it's actually really, I think, really fun having like super deep insights into like what everything is doing, because we are so obsessed with conversion rate and how users flow through our site. Because we have to buy users. I don't know if you guys have seen Hipmunk. We lay our flights out in like a flight results in kind of this graphical kind of Gantt chart view. A lot of users, some users like love it immediately. Others get like super confused. And we have to buy a lot of traffic. We do a lot of marketing. We buy traffic from Google. We buy traffic from other comparison sites. There's advertising. There's a variety of ways for users to come into Hipmunk. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what does the user know about us when they get there, and how do we educate them as fast as possible. And it's super rigorous work, and it's kind of tricky. But like getting our bounce rate down, I think we've halved our bounce rate in the last year, which I'm really proud of. And we've also doubled our marketing efficiency in the last year just by paying attention to these things really, really closely. The other thing I'm really proud about at Hipmunk that I think applies to any business is you should be really aware of your company culture, of what your values are, of why people work at your business. Because very few people at Hipmunk thought they were going to work at a travel company as adults. And I always want people at Hipmunk to think, you know, this is the best job I've ever had. Like, I really believe in what we're doing. I believe in our leadership. I believe in making our users happy. And we work very hard to kind of create that feeling at Hipmunk, that everybody is kind of in this together. And the way you do that is by, one, I think, believing it yourself, like really internalizing those things. So even though I think travel's like a really difficult space, and it's probably not something I would choose again, I believe that we're actually, like, I take a lot of pride in the fact that we're like taking some stress out of people's lives, right? We're making the act of buying travel less stressful. It's not solving world hunger, it's not like solving the homeless problem, but it is alleviating stress from people's lives, and we're very, very proud about that. The other thing we try to do is eliminate, I try to do this in my personal life and in my work life, like eliminate stress, right? The stress comes from all these like external sources that you can't control, but it also comes from lots of things you can control. And so anything that would cause an employee at Hipmunk to feel stress, we try to take care of. So for example, we don't negotiate on salaries, we just preemptively make the best offers we can. We give people raises all the time. We give people company credit cards so they can buy their own whatever they need to get their job done. We bring in food. We don't work crazy long hours. We want people to enjoy coming to work and save their stress tolerance for times when we really, really need it. So anything we can do to make people kind of happier and a little bit more relaxed at work, we try to do. Because travel is really hard, and every once in a while, Hipmunk's advantage is that we can move fast against, relative to our competitors. So it's very important to us that, when we need to drop everything and work on X because we're trying to win this deal, that everybody's mentally well prepared and ready to rock. So when we do need to work killer hours and really crank, everybody's good to go. And then in between those times, we can kind of relax and be more thoughtful and deliberate about what we're doing. And that's gone really well. I think our employees really love working at Hipmunk. I really love working at Hipmunk. I think we've built a really wonderful team, and I'm really, really proud of that. So with that said, let's do some Q&A, I think. This is usually the fun part.
Ready for questions? Do we have questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got one right here in the blue.
Here you go.
Okay, 2 questions. I'll try to remember them. First one was, you said you brought in someone from Zynga and then she doubled your
Yeah.
effectiveness. What kind of things did you do? It sounds like there's a lot of just general goal setting. And
Yep.
then the second question is, in terms of thinking big, the airline industry is sort of notorious for having razor thin profit margins. So you guys
Yep.
are kind of somewhat feeding off of that. Are you guys thinking about sort of trying to disrupt it in any way? I think I even used Hipmunk not that long ago, and literally the cheapest flight, I had 2 options. They were the same price, and it was going from Pittsburgh to Baltimore to Arizona, or Baltimore to Pittsburgh to Arizona, and those were cheaper than directly flying from either of those, even though they were cross.
Yep. Okay, so the first question is, what did we do that actually doubled our productivity? So it was the transition from the conversations I would have with, I'd get into work, and I basically have conversations with all of our engineers hey, how's it going? What are you working on? What do you want to be working on? I like those conversations. They like those conversations. Everybody kind of worked on what they wanted, but it meant we were kind of a little stateless, because every day we might be in a different mood, and what we're working on might change, because we just weren't aligned enough, and we didn't have good product people saying we should do this and this is how we should do it. We didn't have design. Hipmunk, a company known for design, didn't have any full-time designers. Just I don't know, blows my mind, the silly things we did. So when you know what you're working on every day and what you're going to build and what it's going to look like and what it's going to do, work is so much faster. And so that was basically the transition, right? It's just having much more concrete plans. But it was actually kind of a tough transition, because before we had this kind of very conversational management style with people, and then it became a little bit more one way. It's I need you to do X. And so it requires a change of strategy, right? So you need a couple things. First, you need everybody to be on the same page, that you have to trust the PMs to do their job. You have to trust the designers to do their job. You can't be involved in every single decision. Nobody can be involved in every single decision. So everybody needs to trust the teams to do their stuff as good as they can. And then you have to make sure, now you have to start thinking about, how do I get people bought in to what we want them to do? Because it's no longer, what do you want to do? It's here's what the business wants you to do. And so and that's basically, we just have kind of a lot of meetings and conversations about where we're going, how we're going to get there, why we're doing that. So that by the time when I come to somebody and say hey, we want to redesign this page to improve SEO, they know that oh, SEO is super important. Here's how it works. I know they've been thinking about this for a while, and so that sort of thing. So that and it was a bit of a rocky transition, but I think I had this engineer come to me, and he was basically man, the PM that we hired, that I think that taught us a lot of this, Nancy, he was Nancy's a slave driver. I don't know if I like working with her. And I was dude, look back at the last month of work. Look how much you did. You didn't work any extra hours, and you did twice as much. So I'm on her side. And but eventually that's kind of the message. It's like, look at what you've done. Like, this is really impressive. So we kind of all went through that transition together, and I think we came out much healthier. Okay, your second question was like, basically how do we deal with like low margins in the travel industry? But yeah, it's like, we didn't know that going in. I mean, we should have. It's like kind of one of those obvious things that like airlines are always going out of business and perpetually bankrupt because it's a lousy business. They have razor thin margins, and we're a middleman, which means our margins are going to be even thinner. So we don't make a lot of money from flights. We make a lot of money from ads. We make a lot of money from hotels. And flights is, we're just trying to solve a problem users have. The kind of pricing, airlines have really weird pricing. There's this like very complicated field called like yield management, which is like, how do you maximize the amount of revenue you make? And airlines do these seemingly bizarre things in the name of maximizing revenue, encouraging people to take other routes and whatnot. We don't really play that game, and I'm not particularly interested in doing it. We, I think, are pretty comfortable with our space, our position in the market, which is acting as a facilitator, and we just don't get too hung up on actual flight revenue, because it's just kind of, you know, you're chasing a small pool. But there are lots of other parts of our business that are really, really, really healthy, and so that's where we focus our energy. Here, if you just yell the question at me, I'll repeat it back to the audience. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, what was my experience with Udacity? So Udacity is an online education company. They, at the time, specialized in computer science. I think they've gone back to computer science. They kind of branched out and tried all sorts of things. A CS professor of mine in college that I've become friends with was basically their, what they called VP of Education. And so he asked me, hey, do you want to teach a course for Udacity on web development? And I love teaching. So I was like, yeah, sure, that'll be a lot of fun. And he was like, okay, it's 7 one-hour lectures is what we need from you. And I was like, great, that's like 7 one-hour talks. And since I prepare about 5 minutes per talk, that'll take like 35 minutes of work plus 1 hour to record these things. That's actually like kind of the math I did in my head. It's like, oh, that's no commitment at all. Turns out teaching is really, really hard. So while it was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done, and I actually, I think I get recognized more for Udacity than anything else, probably because my voice and face are on there so much, but it's like, and I'm so proud of it. But we did this in like this kind of low point at Hipmunk when I was talking about like, hey, we didn't really know what we're doing, or kind of like going off on tangents, we're not planning things well. And then meanwhile, I basically took this other full-time job teaching web development. And so it was super distracting. But I really, really loved doing it. I was very passionate, I still am, about teaching people how to write web software the way I write web software, which I think is better than the way most people write web software. And so it's just really fun to share that. I'm so proud when I meet people who told me they took my class and now they can build stuff. And so it's a really good feeling. I think like 250,000 people have taken my course or something like that. So I'm really happy to have had that kind of impact on kind of young developers' lives. Because I study computer science. I've been programming my whole life. That's my first love. And I really enjoy sharing that with people.
All right, Steve. We actually have a question from Twitter from @TieDye. What's your favorite subreddit to surf?
Oh man, I get asked this every year.
I
The
figured.
answer's still the same. It's Circle Jerk. It's like Circle Jerk's basically like a satire of the rest of Reddit. I think that humanity in general, San Francisco in particular, and Reddit like definitely have become extremely like self-righteous and hypocritical, and I love Circle Jerk for making fun of that. I think everybody could just chill out a little bit and quit hating on everything all the time. And so like I'm doing right now. So yeah, I love Circle Jerk. It's wonderful. Those guys are very, very funny. Good question. So the question was, like the failures and mistakes we made, when did we know they were mistakes? No, well, maybe that was Trip. No, Reddit was the first thing I did. We had an idea for a business that didn't get into Y Combinator. We were rejected on it. Like, I wanted to build a company where, I wanted you to be able to order food from your cell phone. Sheetz gas station has like this MTO, like build your sub electronic thing, and I was like, oh, I want to hook my phone up to that, so when I'm pumping gas, I can have my sandwich can be being made, so I don't have to go in. So it's like this very linear process, right? I pump gas, I go in, I order my food, then it gets made, and I felt like the guy inside could be making my sandwich while I'm pumping gas. That was it. That was going to change the world. And it's actually funny that this again goes back to my like thinking small thing. When we told Paul this idea, he was like, that's the best idea I've ever heard. You're going to eliminate waiting in lines. And I was like, no, Paul, you don't get it. I just want to have my sandwich like 5 minutes sooner. He's like, this is great. Like, everybody's going to use this everywhere. Those lines are going to disappear. And I was like, okay, Paul. But, that's what he does, right? He just like kind of immediately scales every idea up to its like maximum size. But at the time, like, this was in 2005, so iPhones didn't exist, internet didn't exist at restaurants, like cell phone apps didn't really exist. You had to build these like kind of crappy Java WAP stuff. So it was an idea that was ahead of its time and maybe not a good idea at all. I mean, I suppose if we eliminated lines, that'd be great, but we weren't thinking that way. Yeah. Reddit is looking more like a business. Reddit Gold. So that was Reddit has done very little since I've left, and that was one of the things they've done. And I thought it was the dumbest idea. I was like, when they announced it, it sounded so hapless. They were like, we can't afford our servers. We have to do this thing. Can you guys kind of give us money? And I was just like, you guys, like, that is like, you sound like such wimps, and this is never going to work. And the fact that people just give each other money or like buy gold for each other is just this like miracle of the internet. I don't understand it. Reddit makes a ton of money from it. Look, I have nothing to do with it. I'm so happy for them, but like it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I would never do that on purpose. I still don't get it. So I don't know what to say. Like it's just a beautiful, wonderful thing. It's Reddit. Nothing about Reddit makes sense. Like, that users just give each other money, and that's whatever. It's really neat. I really wanted though. I really wanted to steal this idea from Something Awful, which is like, because Something Awful had this like, instead of giving people gold, you can change people's usernames. No, you can change their avatar. You can pay $5 to change somebody's avatar, and then you have to pay $5 to restore it. I thought that was really cool. I really wanted to do that on Reddit, but that would probably just be a total disaster. But anyway, yeah, I don't understand gold. I wouldn't advise you do that. It doesn't make sense. Reddit is a special thing. There's nothing to learn from that business. It's just like, look at it, appreciate it. It's amazing, but who knows? Yeah.
All right. We actually can't take any more questions right now. The last final question that we have for you is, could you share with us what you believe the next big thing is in the next big thing or the next wave will be in your industry?
Oh, okay. Okay, the next big thing in my industry, so that's travel right now. Travel's interesting because it's become more commoditized over the years. More people travel more often and spend less money doing so. And so I think there's some really, I think Airbnb is a really good example of people's opinions changing on how they travel and what they want to experience. So I'm really looking forward to a world where, the act of deciding to go someplace, getting there and having a good time is way less stressful. We have a piece to play in that of like where you should go, how you should get there, buying your tickets, but I still think it's like, there's just so much friction there. I think there's lots of kind of industry obstacles that are going to take a while to disappear. But I think 20 years from now, the way people travel is going to be totally different. Hopefully the cost of travel comes way down, but it's gonna take some time. I think we have some major energy problems there, right? planes still run on fuel. Fuel is still really expensive. But I don't think that's going to be the case for very long. Well, for forever, rather. So once we get on the other side of that, I think things will be really, really cool. So, all right. Thank you very much, everybody. I always feel very welcome when I come here. This is like my favorite trip of the year, second favorite trip of the year. So it's like, yeah, I'm just really, really happy to be a part of it. So I hope you all guys all enjoyed it.
Thanks, Steve. One more round of applause for Steve Huffman, everybody. We're going to take a short break.